Hey, shalom, shalom from your Dutch Uncle John. Still here in Kyrgyzstan, but this might be the last one from Kyrgyzstan. We're supposed to leave next week, we'll see. But we're here to tell you what it is in the Hebrew alphabet, and today we're doing the 16th letter, the letter Ayin. The Ayin and the Pei go together. Hopefully you've seen the Pei video. The Ayin has a Gematria of 70, and 70 is a special number for God. It's got his 7 in it, right? So you're going to see a lot of 70s woven through here. The ancient picture of an Ayin, here's the picture. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to give you a hint and see if you can figure it out. There's the hint. They see. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Yes, it's the eyes. The Ayin, its ancient picture is an eye. It looks like an eye. All right? And if you ever wondered, why does the word eye, why is it spelled E-Y-E? You know, why not just the letter I? Well, I think it comes from the Hebrew. It has an Ayin, looks like the letter Y. Okay, so why is there a Y in I? It's from the Ayin. Nice. All right. Okay, the Ayin is a letter. Ayin is also a word. It means various things. One of them, it means I, as we just said. There are 11,244 ayins in the Torah, okay? And the Greek equivalent is the Omicron. Very nice. There is a cursive version of ayin. And to form an ayin, you start with the letter nun. And then you elongate it. And you add a vav, and there you have an ayin. Very nice. Notice the ayin is not the letter tzadi. They kind of look similar, okay? Nor is the ayin the letter aleph. And although it looks nothing like an aleph, the sound that it makes is often can be confused, because the Ayin will make an A sound, an Ah sound often. And we'll see an example of that later in the video. The first Ayin in the Bible is in Genesis 1:2, where the earth was formless and void, and darkness was al. Al means over, the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving al over the surface of the waters. So there's two ayins in that second verse. And then just 3 verses later in Genesis 1:5, it says, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was Erev, and there was Boker, one day. Erev is evening. Actually, Erev is something like it's obscure, it's dark and hard to see, and it's been used. It's used to mean morning or evening. And notice, Erev came before Boker, before morning. This is why on a Jewish calendar, every new day starts at sunset, because evening comes before morning. All right. And we get the word Arab comes from Erev. It's spelled the same there with an Ayin Resh Bet. If you jump to chapter 2 in Genesis, verse 8, it says, Yahweh Elohim planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed Aleph Tav, the man whom he had formed. The word for garden is gan, and it's the Gan Eden. And Eden is Ayin Dalet Nun. If you look at the pictographs of those 3 letters, Ayin is an I, Dalet is a door, and Nun, this is the final Nun, and Nun, so feet. It's represented by a fish, or it represents life. So Eden, you can eye the door to life. Look and see the door to life was in Eden. All right. In verse 24 of chapter 3, this is after they took a bite of the forbidden fruit. It says, so he drove the man out, and he placed at the east of the Gan Eden cherubim, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. Okay, here, what was I wanted to point out in this verse? Well, I do want to point out in Eden again, Ayin, Dalet, Nun, if you just take the last two letters, Dalet, Nun is the word Dan, and Dan is judge, and the Ayin is I, or so I the judge, or see the judge. And here we do see the judge. Man broke the rule. He ate from the tree, but he wasn't supposed to, and the judge has now given down his punishment. You are now banished from this Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. All right? So, there it is. You can see a lot in there. And then that same verse, well, in the previous verse, where it's, in this verse, because it says, and he placed cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. This word, eitz, it's an ayin and a tzadi. I told you don't confuse these two because they look kind of similar. But if you put them together, ayin tzadi spells eitz, which is the Hebrew word for tree. Okay? And there were two trees in the garden. There was the eitz hachaim. That's the tree of life. This is the one they put the cherubim with flaming swords to guard against. And there was the one that from which they weren't allowed to eat. And that is the eitz hadat tov vara. You can read it there. Eitz, tree. Hadat. Ha is the. Dalet, ayin. We've talked about this before. Da is knowledge. Right? So it's the tree of knowledge. Tov is good. Vara. Va is and. Ra. Resh ayin. There's an ayin again. Ra is evil. Remember, it was in Pharaoh's name. We showed that in other videos. So you had the two trees. They ate from the one they weren't supposed to. God was not going to let them now eat from the tree of life, which had he, I think they would have lived forever. All right? Okay. All right. And by the way, this ayin represents I, and I is, you can see and you take in information, right? So it's not just I, it also has to do with knowledge and understanding and discernment and processing and getting it. You understand? It's not just I. All of this is encompassing. Not learning so much, but the knowledge and the understanding. Okay. And Satan, the serpent, the Nachash, back in Genesis 3:5, he said, "For God knows that in that day you eat from it, your eyes, ayinim, will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Look how it says, your eyes. The first three letters, Ayin, Yod, Nun, that spells Ayin, right? And then with the next Yod, that's, or the Kaf, remember, is your. You put your hand out, right? It's mine is the closed and your. And the mem on the end is the plural. So it's your eyes. Ayin. Very nice. How you're learning all this. Jump to Genesis 3:21. The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. This is after he's kicked them out. God, showing his mercy, he makes garments of skin. Remember, they were naked, and they didn't even know they were naked until they took a bite. But the word for skin is or. It's an Ayin Vav Resh. And this word or, we see a version of this back in Genesis 1:3. It says, and God said, be light, and light was. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayi or. The word for light is or, but it's spelled Aleph Vav Resh. So they were clothed in or, God's light, Aleph Vav Resh, and then after they sinned, God clothed them in or, Ayin Vav Resh, animal skin. God did a sacrifice because they sinned. God now, something innocent must die. Blood must be shed. Okay? So they went from clothed in or to clothed in or. And notice the second one begins with an ayin, I, knowledge. And what did Satan say to them? Right? You will be, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. There's knowledge involved there, and it wasn't something that they really needed, did it? Or was it? Okay, in Genesis chapter 10, this is after the flood. You have, Genesis chapter 10 is known as the Table of Nations. Verse 1 says, now these are the records of the generations of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and sons were born to them after the flood. And there it goes through and lists each son and their children and some of their grandchildren. Japheth, it lists 14 of his descendants. Ham, it lists 30 of his descendants. Shem, it lists 26 of his descendants. And you can go through these names, and they all have modern equivalents. Okay, Cush is one of Ham's son. Cush is the area below Egypt. Sudan, Ethiopia area. Mitzrayim is Egypt. Put is like Libya, Algeria. Canaan was kind of in the promised land there. And you'll see some famous people from some of these. Okay. Looking under Japheth. Magog. Magog is the part of Russia. The Caucasus maybe. Okay. That area. What's another one here? And if you go under Shem, these are the ones that lead to Abraham. Okay, but you can. These are the original 70 nations. We're going to talk about this in a little bit later in this talk. All right, look at and the reason I even brought that up is because 70. Okay, Ayin represents 70, so you're going to see lots of 70s throughout the Bible. Genesis 15, verses 1, 2, and 3. It says, after these events, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram replied, O Adonai Yahweh, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. Abram continued, behold, you have given me no offspring. So a servant in my household will be my heir. Abraham, remember, he's, 90 years old, no children. I think he's 75 here. This is before Ishmael was born. But he's lamenting God, I have no one to leave anything to. It's just me and my wife and my trusted servant, Eliezer. Well, his name, Eliezer, you can break this down. The first two, Aleph Lamed, is El, that's God. The Yod is my. And then Etzer. Etzer is Ayin, Zayin, Resh. Etzer means help, helper. So God is my help is Eliezer's name. Got it? Now, I bring this up because it begins with an Ayin. That's a very important word. But I also want to point out that this is a type of the complex unity is shown here. Because you have Abram as the father. He is going to have Yitzhak the son. And you have a trusted servant, Eliezer, which is kind of the spirit, the servant type. Okay? The servant always points to the son. If you watch my video on Akedah, my goodness, it's very cool because especially Akedah Part 2, it explains this complex unity picture in these three. Abraham the father, Isaac the son, Eliezer the most trusted servant, the Holy Spirit. And the Spirit is sent out to get a bride for the Son. It's just beautiful, beautiful. Okay, let's go. Another Ayin is in Genesis 29:33. This is Jacob's wife, Leah. Then she conceived again and bore a son and said, because Yahweh has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Shimeon, which Christian churches, we call it Simeon. But notice it's a Shin, Mem, Ayin, Vav, Nun. And Shimeon means hearing. Okay? And what is the verse said? Because Yahweh has heard that I am unloved, he's given me this son also, and she named him Simeon, hearing. Very nice. You're going to see that again soon. Genesis 46:27. And the sons of Joseph who were born with him in Egypt were 2, and all the persons of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70. Again, another 70. This is when Jacob reveals himself to the brothers, and they go home and Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and he sends the brothers home to bring Jacob and the whole clan down to Egypt. And there were 70 in total. Exodus 1:5 repeats this. All the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were 70 in number, but Joseph was already in Egypt. When Jacob died, Genesis 50, verses 1, 2, and 3, then Joseph fell upon his father's face, wept over him, and kissed him. And Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So they embalmed him, taking the 40 days required to complete the embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. So you see 70 it's going to be all through this Bible. By the way, if you look at the 12 sons of Jacob, here they are, the 12 tribes, right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Yehuda, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. I have their Gematria values for each, and they total up to 3,176. And these 12 boys, they came from 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and 4 matriarchs, Sarah, Rebekah, Leah, and Rachel. 7 parents total. There's 7. The patriarchs, Abraham is 248, Isaac 208, Jacob 182. The patriarchs add up to 638. The matriarchs, Sarah is 505, Rebekah 307, Leah is 36, Rachel is 238. They add up to 1,086. If you throw in the 12 boys, the 3,176, the whole clan adds up to 4,900, which is 70 times 70. Ayin times Ayin. Let's jump ahead. Exodus 6, verse 20. It says, Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And the length of Amram's life was 137 years. We've talked about, if you've watched our math video, math part 1, or 137, that number is God's special number, shows up everywhere. But there's Amram's age, 137. And notice that Amram begins with an Ayin. Ayin, Mem, Resh, Mem. And his mother was Jochebed. And I just want to show you their names briefly. Jochebed starts with a Yod. Okay, that's Yahweh, God. And then Kabod. Kabod is the Hebrew word for glory. So Jochebed, Moses' mother, her name means the glory of God. Amram, the Ayin Mem, is the Hebrew word for nation. Okay, or people. There's a nation, a people. And Ram is the Hebrew word for exalted. So you have an exalted nation marrying the glory of God. And it produces Moses, the deliverer. If you jump forward, look at this one. Isaiah 54:5. It says, For your husband is your maker, whose name is Yahweh of hosts. And your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel, who is called the God of all the earth. In this you have the glory of God, marries an exalted nation. The exalted nation is Israel. And they bring forth Yeshua, the Messiah, the Redeemer. And the Messiah is the Holy One of Israel. That's what Messiah is. Okay? And it says in this verse, he is called, who is called God of all the earth. It's letting you know that Messiah will be God. Yeshua, Jesus, is God made flesh, made in the form of a man. Beautiful. You know, I watch these, a lot of Hebrew rabbis, and they keep saying, God is not a man, God is not a man. No, God can do whatever he wants. God can become a man, and God did become a man. He came to earth in the form of Yeshua, Jesus. And he became our perfect sacrifice. He loved us so much, we needed a blood sacrifice. Just like God did a sacrifice for Adam and his wife and made garments of skin, he provided a sacrifice for them, for that Adam, that man, and he provided a sacrifice for you, this Adam, me, for all of us. Very beautiful. All right. Exodus 15:27. They've left Egypt, and it says in 27, then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the waters. Okay, well, let's see. I don't see I in there anywhere. All right. But here's why this verse is in here. We told you that Ayin was a letter. Ayin also meant I. And Ayin also means a spring. Okay, where out of which water comes, right? So here you have, there were 12 springs of water. If you notice in that second line, it's Ayinot. Is the next to the last, Ayinot Mayim. Those are springs of water. So there's Ayin, you hear Ayinot, okay? And there were 70 palm trees. So remember, Ayin is 70. So it's combining the two of these, Ayin and 70 in the one verse. Very nice. Exodus 21, 23 through 25. He's giving some rules about punishments. And it says, but if there is any further inquiry, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. In verse 24, it says, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. By the way, you have a lot of people bring this up, a lot of atheists and agnostics. They say, what kind of God is this? In the Old Testament, you say God never changes. Well, in the Old Testament, he was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And then he's in the New Testament, turn the other cheek and love your neighbor as yourself. And God changed. No, 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 no. No. He did not change. First of all, love your neighbor as yourself is Leviticus 19:18. And in the New Testament, Jesus says that's the second most important commandment. So that's the same commandment in both, for Old and New Testament. And as for eye and tooth for tooth, he is setting up here, prior to this rule, the rule would be life for eye. Okay, you knock out my tooth, I chop off your head. The punishment has to equal the crime, you understand? So when he's saying, listen, the new penalty rules are life for life. If you take his life, then your life will be taken. If you knock out his eye, then your eye is. You don't over punish, you understand? He gives you a slap on the face and you stab him in the heart. No! Keep the punishments equal. So this, Exodus 21, verses 23 through 25, this is, prior to this, it was a free-for-all in the punishment. So this is a step up toward turn the other cheek. You understand? He wasn't saying, well, you get the picture. All right. Exodus 24, verses 1 through 11. We're not going to read them all. But here's another example of 70. It says, then Yahweh said to Moshe, come up to Yahweh, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of Israel's elders, and you are to worship at a distance. Then Moshe went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was a work like a pavement made of sapphire. A pavement made of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. But God did not lay his hand on the nobles of Israel. They saw him, and they ate and drank. Okay, there's 2 points I want to make here. One, there were 70. Okay, so there again is the 70 shows up. And even the bigger message in this one is verse 11. God did not lay his hand on the nobles of Israel. They saw him, and they ate and drank. The Jews love to say, no one can see God and live. But I've got here 71, 2, 3, 4. 74 men went up and they saw Yahweh, and they ate and they drank with him. Abraham saw Yahweh at the oaks of Mamre. There are many. Adam and Eve saw Yahweh walking in the cool of the day through the garden. There are many examples of people seeing Yahweh. So it's not a stretch that Yahweh could come to earth, become a man, and take our sacrifice in the form of Yahshua HaMashiach. I just want to point these out. Numbers 14, verse 11 through 14. Then Yahweh said to Moshe, how long will these people reject me, and how long will they not believe me, with all the signs which I have performed among them? I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. And Moses said to Yahweh, Then the Egyptians will hear it, for by your might you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, Yahweh, are among these people, that you, Yahweh, are seen face to face with your cloud, and your cloud stands above them. And you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day, and a pillar of fire by night. God is kind of upset with these people because they did the golden calf, and they're grumbling and complaining, and he's thinking like, you know what, I'm through with these people. I'm going to start over with you, Moses. And Moses says, no, you can't do that. The Egyptians will hear it, that you saved these people and took them out of the desert and abandoned them. You know, he didn't want God's name being smeared, so that's part of this. Verse 14, they have heard that you, Yahweh, are among these people, and that you, Yahweh, are seen face to face. Again, Moses sees God face to face. But in this verse 14, if you look at the Hebrew, it says, for you, O Lord, are seen eye to eye. The English translation changes it to face, but in the original Hebrew, it's Ayin. Ayin. This would be the third line, third and fourth word. Ayin ba'ayin. Eye to eye. Nice. Numbers 29, verses 12 through 34. We're not going to read all of them all, don't worry. But it says, this is the instruction for Sukkot. Sukkot is the seventh Moedim, right, of the seven. These are the appointed times where Yahweh wants to meet with mankind. All right? And most people in the world don't even know they exist. Thank God that the Jews are keeping these seven Moedim. And there are three Moedim in the fall. There's Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, or we sometimes call it Rosh Hashanah. Then that's on the first day of Tishri. On the 10th day of Tishri is Yom Kippur, the holiest day. This is when the priest would bring the two goats and cast lots. One was the scapegoat, and he put all the sins of Israel on the scapegoat and sent it out to Mount Seir to die. And the other goat was sacrificed, and the blood was poured on the altar, on the mercy seat in the temple or the tabernacle. And God would forgive the sins of Israel for the nation. And then 5 days later, on the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work, and you shall observe a feast to Yahweh for 7 days. This is Sukkot. This is the feast of celebration, rejoicing. We've been redeemed. You know, these three fall feasts. On Rosh Hashanah, you repent. And you repent for 10 days. And on the 10th day, they do the sacrifice and pour the blood on the mercy seat. And then you are redeemed. And then after you are redeemed, on the 15th day, you rejoice. And you rejoice for 7 days. Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles. A lot of the Christian Bibles call it. And during these 7 days of Sukkot, verse 13 says, you shall present a burnt offering, an offering by fire, as a soothing aroma to Yahweh. On the first day of this feast, you would sacrifice 13 bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs, on and on. And then on the second day, 12 bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs, on and on. On the third day, 11 bulls. On the fourth day, 10 bulls. On the 5th day, 9 bulls. On the 6th day, 8 bulls. And then on the 7th day, 7 bulls, 2 rams, 14 male lambs, on and on and on. Notice that during these 7 days of rejoicing, you are sacrificing a total of 70 bulls. Oh, there's our 70 again. And what is so important about the 70 bulls? Remember Genesis 10, the table of nations. There were 70 nations that came out of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, Noah's sons. All right? So when the Jews are celebrating and sacrificing 70 bulls, they're sacrificing these for the 70 nations. Now, the Jews don't do this anymore. They don't have a temple in Jerusalem. We've torn down the temple. Isn't it funny? The Gentiles were so stupid. We're so stupid. We have people who are sacrificing to God for us, and the Gentiles tear down their temple and stop them from doing that. Imagine the blessings that the world, the nations would have if the Jews were there able to do as God instructed. Man is so stupid. Present company included. All right. Judges 2:11. Another Ayin word. Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. Baal, okay, or Baalim is the plural. And Baal, he was a heathen god. All right. This is why God keeps getting upset with the Jews, because they do stupid things like this. One day they see the Red Sea part, and the next day they're doing a golden calf. Humans. Okay, so Baal is an Ayin word. Psalm 90, verse 10. As for the days of your life, they contain 70 years. Or, if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone and we fly away. Here's our 70 years that man is appointed a nice life. 80 if you're strong. And that's interesting. 70 is Ayin. 80 is the next letter, Pei. And 70 years, sometimes you'll hear people talk about 70. A score in English is 20 years. So 70 is 20, 40, 60, and 10, 70. Okay? You had Abraham Lincoln said 70 years ago. 87 years ago, from the time he gave that speech, 87 years ago was 1776, when we had our Constitution drafted there. Or not a Constitution, our independence. Constitution came out a few years later. So 70 years. Here's how you say 70 years. It's Shabuim Shana. You see it there? Shabuim has an Ayin in it, the word 70, and then Shana is years. If you put the Gematria in for Shabuim Shana, Shin is 300, Bet is 2, Ayin 70, Yod is 10, Mem is 40, and then you have Shin is 300, Nun is 50, Hey is 5, adds up to 777. Very nice. Speaking of this 70 years, Adam lived 930 years. God told Adam, in the day that you eat from this tree, you will surely die. Okay, well that's odd, because the day that Adam actually ate from the tree, he didn't drop dead, right? But there are verses in the Old Testament and there's a verse in the New Testament that says, to God, a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. God isn't sitting there looking at his second hand or his minute hand or his hour hand or even his day hand. God deals in big, he's eternal, right? A day is 1,000 years. And Adam lived 930 years. Notice he didn't live 1,000. He died in the day, God's day, that he ate from the tree. Then a Messiah is to come, this promised Messiah, and the generator of this Messiah was King David. All right, and King David lived 70 years, 70. That's not very long, really, when you look at all the other ages of biblical people. But David, he lived 70, and then you have Mashiach. Mashiach, when he comes back, he's going to rule and reign for 1,000 years when Jesus returns. And these are the three in the word Adam, man, Adam, Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Aleph is Adam, 930. Dalet is David, 70. And the son of David is Mashiach, 1,000. 930 plus 70 equals 1,000. Very, very clever. Psalm 23, verse 1, a psalm of David. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. We all know this one, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The word shepherd here is a ra'ah. It's a resh, ayin, hey. And I put the pictographs in. Resh is a head. Ayin is an eye. Hey is behold. And if you just look at the pictographs, it defines the word shepherd. It's the head man. His eye beholds the sheep, right? The head man's eye beholds. That's a shepherd. And in this verse, it doesn't actually say ra'ah. Ra'ah is the word for shepherd. Here it says ro'i. Ro'i is my shepherd, right? The Lord is my shepherd. It ends in a yod. Yod is that closed hand. My, you put it at the end of the word. My, Eli, Eli, my God. Ro'i, my shepherd. Okay? And my shepherd, if you put the values in, Resh is 200, Ayin is 70, Yod is 10, Ro'i adds up to 280, which is 7 times 40, or 70 times 4. Again with the Ayin and the 70. Proverbs 7:2. Keep my commandments and live. Guard my teachings as the apple of your eye. Again with the eye, and it's ayineka. It's the last word in the Hebrew verse there. You see ayineka, and it ends in a final kaf. The kaf is the open palm. It's your. The yod is my at the end. Kaf at the end is your eye. And the apple of your eye is your pupil. Okay? Right, that little black center there. Okay, Isaiah 52, starting in verse 7. I love this verse. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace and bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, your Elohim reigns. Listen, your watchmen lift up their voices. Together they shout for joy. For every eye will see when the Lord returns to Zion. The Lord has bared, Aleph Tav, his holy arm in the sight of all the nations. All the ends of the earth will see, Aleph Tav, the salvation of our God. In verse 8, I have the Hebrew here. It says, for every eye will see when Yahweh returns to Zion. Nice. And it's Yahweh's going to return to Zion. That means he was there before. And who is Yahweh? Yud, He, Vav, He. Yud, hand, He, reveals. Vav, nail, He, reveals. The hand reveals, the nail reveals. Hint, hint. When is he going to return? And when was he there the first time? He was there the first time in the form of Yahshua HaMashiach. That's Yahweh. Okay, so every eye will see when Yahweh returns to Zion. And it says all, in verse 10, all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. Look at the word salvation. It's the next to the last Hebrew word down there. It's a yud, shin, vav, ayin, tav. The first four letters, yud, shin, vav, ayin, spell Yeshua. Spell Yeshua. And the tav is the cross. The word for salvation is Yeshua and a cross. You know, the Jews say there's no reference to Jesus in the Old Testament. He's everywhere. The word salvation is Jesus, Yeshua, on a cross. How do they miss this? Well, no, I know how they miss it. Because that was God put blinders over their eyes because of their stubbornness. And you know what? It was all part of God's plan. Because of their stubbornness, they didn't see their Messiah. They rejected him. God then scattered them all over the world. And everywhere they went, they took with them their Torah. And the Torah was spread all over the world. And we Gentiles have the Jews to thank for bringing it all over the world. You know, we don't know anything about the God of Peru. It's not, he's not, if there is one or was one, he's just not known anywhere. You know, or the God of Kyrgyzstan, or the God of any other place. But the God of Israel, those Jews were scattered. Thank you, Jews. You've taken his word. The Torah shall go forth from Jerusalem, and it did. Thank you. Isaiah 53, verse 11. My righteous servant will justify the many, and he will bear their iniquities. The righteous servant is the Mashiach, and he's going to justify the many, and he will bear their iniquities. The Messiah is going to bear the sins of many. That's, again, this is a picture of Yeshua coming to earth and taking our sin and becoming our korban, our sacrifice. Isaiah 53 says it. And that word there, my righteous servant. Servant is Obed. It's an Ayin, Bet, Dalet, servant. We get the Old Testament prophet, Obadiah. Obadiah, Yah is God, a servant of Yah. The Arab speakers have Abdullah. Abdullah, it's the servant of Allah. Okay, that's the Arabic version of Obadiah. But Obed begins with Ayin. Okay, we said Ayin is a letter, Ayin is an I, Ayin is also a spring. It's interesting that God uses the same word, spelled the same, for I and a spring. What does an I and a spring have in common? Well, remember, we're getting into God's thinking. You know what? Water comes out of both of them. Ah, there's the tie-in. Very nice. And you know, remember whenever Saul was chasing David, and David went and hid in En-Gedi? This is how the Christians say it, right? En-Gedi. En-Gedi is actually Ayin-Gedi. Ayin is the spring. Gedi is a kid goat. The spring of the kid goat. All right. I is Ayin. Ayin is spring. Mayan is a fountain. They're all, water comes out of them. You see there's a connection between all of these. Genesis 16:7. This is whenever Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael. Remember, Abraham's wife, Sarah, she's jealous because Ishmael is getting, Hagar is pushing Ishmael, and Sarah doesn't like it. And so Abraham banishes Hagar and Ishmael. And in verse 7, it says, "And the angel of the Lord found her," Hagar, "by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur." And there's that word Ayin in the second line, second Hebrew word there. Okay. And it's kind of interesting, you know, Ayin is the 16th letter of the Hebrew, and notice that this is in Genesis chapter 16. You have Ayin, spring. And in verse 13, it says, "Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, 'You are a God who sees.' For she said, 'Have I even remained alive here after seeing him?' Therefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roy, well of the living one who sees." So now it's even more interesting because it's chapter 16. The 16th letter is Ayin. Ayin means spring. Hagar is here at a spring, and she names the spring the well, the spring of the living one who sees, which ties in with Ayin, I. So there's some little plays on words going on here that we don't maybe catch in the English. Genesis 29, verse 33, we talked about this one already. This is when Leah conceived and bore a son and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also." So she named him Simeon. And we said Shimeon comes from hearing, right? It's the Hebrew word to hear. And we have a very famous verse in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. The Jews call it the Shema. They call it the Shema because the first word of this verse is Shema. And what's clever about the Shema here is, here's a picture of it. Notice the first word Shema is Shin Mem Ayin. There's a very large Ayin in this verse. And then as Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. And at the end, there's a very large Dalet at the end of Echad. So since we're talking about Ayin, we would be remiss not to mention and point out this large Ayin here. The word Shema, we said, means hear, right? Hear, O Israel. And the word Shema is, if I just asked you, how do you think you'd spell Shema? And if you didn't see this here, you'd think Shin, Mem, Shema. You might be inclined to say Shin, Mem, Aleph. But remember I told you way at the beginning that Ayin is not a Tzadi, even though they look alike, and Ayin is not an Aleph, even though they sound alike. Because if you put an Aleph in Shema, that becomes the Hebrew word maybe, or perhaps. So do you want to say, "Perhaps, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one"? I don't think so. So to avoid that, he put a very large Ayin there, so you don't make the mistake and say perhaps. You say, "Hear, Shema, hear, O Israel." Okay? The Lord our God, the Lord is one. And the reason he put the large Dalet at the end, if you spell Echad, you might be inclined to spell it Aleph, Chet. And because the Dalet and the Resh look similar, you might accidentally put a Resh there. And if you do, remember, Resh is not Dalet. They are not the same. If you put a Resh, you get the word Echar, which is another. Which you'd be saying, if you made both mistakes, "Perhaps, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is another." So to avoid that, he put an enlarged Dalet there. Okay? So now we know, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." If you take the value of those two enlarged letters, the Ayin is 70, the Dalet is 4, and together they add up to 74, the two enlarged letters. If you add up all the letters Gematria between the Aleph, the Ayin and the Dalet, all of those add up to 704, which is 70 and 4, the values of Ayin and Dalet. Very clever. And those two letters together, Ayin and Dalet, spell odd, which is the word witness in Hebrew. If you spell them backwards, Dalet, Ayin, it spells the word da, as in know, to know something, right? So he wants you to witness this verse, and he wants you to know this verse, okay? Also, Ayin is eye. Dalet is door. Here it's telling you that those two enlarged letters, keep your eye on the door. Well, that's interesting because Yeshua said, I am the door. No one gets to the Father but through me. Remember, Jesus is the door. He fits in that Passover. When they put the blood on the lintel and the doorposts, the blood on top was the crown of thorns. The blood on both sides were his hands nailed. And the blood at the feet where it dripped down from the top lintel where they nailed his feet. Jesus is the door that fits perfectly into that Passover door frame. So, Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Keep your eye on the door. Keep your eye on Jesus, Yahshua HaMashiach. And by the way, this, okay, she named him Simeon, which means hearing, right? Look at Genesis 42. This is when the brothers came to Egypt to get food. And they don't recognize Joseph, but Joseph recognizes them, and he starts playing with them a bit, okay? And he says in Genesis 42:24, he, Joseph, turned away from them and wept. And when he returned to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So Simeon, they're hearing, he gets bound and put in a little prison here for a while, okay? He actually puts all of them in a prison for 2 days, and on the 3rd day he releases them. But then he's going to keep Simeon while they go home and get Benjamin to make sure that they're not lying. But it's interesting, Simeon represents hearing. And Simeon is one of the 12 tribes, the Jewish people, right? And I think, the picture here is that the Jews, Shema, the Jews, Simeon, the Jews hearing is going to be bound. This is why the Jews don't see Yeshua as their Messiah. Their hearing was bound. They talk about it later in I think it's Isaiah. They will have eyes but will not see. They will have ears but cannot hear. Because they've rejected their Messiah, God is going to blind them. Okay? He is going to remove those blinders at some point, about halfway through the tribulation period, when the Antichrist marches into the temple and declares himself God. The Jews will realize, aha, we've been had. But it's very interesting that he took Simeon, okay, which, when we're talking about Shema, we should mention that. And it does say he put all the brothers in jail for 2 days, and on the 3rd day he released them. Well, remember, 2 days is 2,000 years. On the 3rd day they were released, and on the 3rd day, for the 2,000 years, the Jews' hearing has been bound, and on the 3rd day the Jews are going to get it. They're going to see their Messiah. Okay. Oh, by the way, the word odd, Ayin Dalet, also means forever. So this is a truth forever. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Okay, look in Lamentations 1. Here it is, small, squint, hard to see. Here it is bigger. I put the first word of every verse. There are 22 verses. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew. And notice each verse begins with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's an acrostic, and they're in alphabetical order. In verse 2, in chapter 2, there's also 22 verses. And here he does it again, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. They're in alphabetical order until you get to 16 and 17. Here, those two words have been switched. Those two verses, or the alphabets, the letters that begin them. Because Ayin comes before Pei. But in this verse, Pei is coming before Ayin. Notice chapter 1. See, Ayin comes before Pei. It's correct there. In chapter 2, it's incorrect. In chapter 3, before we go, we'll just show you, Pei represents mouth. Ayin represents eye. And you can see in verse 16, it talks about the enemies have opened their mouth. They gnash their teeth. They have swallowed. You see all the, we have swallowed her up. All having to do with mouth. And then we have found it. We have seen it. The seeing comes after the speaking. Right? That's the wrong order. God wants you to see, knowledge, understand before you speak. Got it? That's why Ayin comes before Pei. In chapter 3 of Lamentations, it does it again, except here there's 66 verses. Every 3, the first 3 are Aleph, then 3 are Beit, then 3 Gimel, then 3 Dalet. And when you get down to verses 46 through 51, he's got them backwards. He has 3 Peis before 3 Ayins. And if you look at the verses, enemies have opened our mouths against us. And then they talk about, my eyes run down with streams of water. My eyes pour down unceasingly. Until the Lord looks down and sees from heaven, my eyes bring pain to my soul. You have speaking before seeing. Lamentations 4, also they're backwards. He talks about face before he talks about eyes and watching. Okay? He has it backwards. And in Lamentations 5, it's a free-for-all. There's no pattern. I invite you to look at my Pei video. We explain that more in detail, why those are switched, okay, in more detail. Psalm 119, remember the first 8 verses are all begin with Aleph. And then the next 8 verses, 9 through 16, all begin with Bet. And if you jump down to verses 121 through 128, all of these begin with, in the Hebrew, and it talks about my eyes fail with longing for your salvation. But all of these verses begin with Ayin. Okay. We talked about certain letters. There are 7 of them called the Sha'at Nagetz letters, and they all have crowns on them. And Ayin is one of those crowns, crowned letters. Okay. Tagan are the crowns. Okay. You know, and one more thing about the Tagans, these little crowns, this might be what Yeshua was referring to when he said not one yod or tittle. The yod, not one jot or tittle. The jot is the letter yod, and most suspect that these little crowns, these Tagans, are the tittles he was talking about. Okay, before we finish up, I want to show you one more cool thing. You know, this letter Ayin is spelled Ayin Yod Nun. And it's a final nun, nun sofit. Its value is 70. And if you put the pictographs in for these 3 letters, well, the Ayin, its picture is an eye. And the nun, its picture is a fish. And the Yod, although its picture is a hand, Yod stands for Yahweh, right? So this could be interpreted as see Yahweh's, or see Yah's fish. All right. Well, does Yah have fish? You know what? Yahweh does have fish. He doesn't go by Yahweh. He goes by Yeshua, because Yeshua and Yahweh are one and the same. So you could say, see Yeshua's fish. All right. Well, when and where did Yeshua have fish? Well, in the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, in John 21:11. This is Jesus has been crucified, buried, resurrected, and now the disciples are up on the Sea of Galilee fishing. And in verse 11, it says, Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land, full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Remember, Jesus was on the banks of the Sea of Galilee, and he yelled out to them, cast your nets on the right side of the boat. And they didn't recognize and know who he was. And then they cast their nets to the right side, and they caught 153 fish. Well, you know what? Something strange here. If I would happen to pull in a giant net of fish, I would say, great, I just caught a giant net of fish. I don't know if I would sit and count them all, but somebody obviously counted them all because they knew that there were 153. And why was there 153? What is so special about that number? Well, I will tell you, just mathematically, 153 is a cool number. It's equal to 3 times 3 times 17. So there you have your 1, 3, and 7. All right. 153 is also a perfect triangle number. Very nice. Okay, pointing to complex unity. If you put in this little math formula, the summation of 1 to 17, meaning if you add the digits 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 17, you will get 153. Okay, that's nice. Here's a very cool thing about the number 153, and not every number does this, very few do. But if you cube each digit of 153, 1 cubed is 1, 5 cubed is 125, 3 cubed is 27. The cubes of each digit add up to the original number, 153. Very nice. Okay, so that's all mathematical cool stuff. Is there a tie-in with Yeshua and Jesus or Yahweh or anything spiritual? Well, as we said, Ayin is 70, and we have 153. How does 153 tie in with 70? Well, it's kind of obvious. 153 equals 37 times 70. I was a math teacher. I can confirm this. Let's look at it in the Greek. I can't read it because it's Greek. It's all Greek to me. But here is the phrase 153 in Greek. And remember, Greek has their own version of Gematria. They call it isopsephy. So if we plug in all the numbers for the letters in 153, add them together, they come out to 2,590. And 2,590 equals 37 times 70. How clever. There's our 37. He's got it hidden everywhere. And by the way, we remember, not only does he have 37 hidden, he has 137. And 137 is also a multiple of, or a factor of 153. 153 is 137 times 8. How do you say? Well, if you write 153 in Hebrew and put in the Gematria values, it adds up to 1,096. and that is 8 times 137. Whew, how does he do that? Oh, I don't know. Unbelievable. What a mighty God we serve. Okay, we're going to leave you with this last one, Zechariah 2:8. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, after glory he has sent me against the nations which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. Here, this is the Messiah speaking, and he is talking about Israel. God bless Israel, the apple of God's eye. All right, my friends, to God be the honor, to God be the glory, to God be the praise. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Wait! We have a bonus! I can't let you go without a bonus. I'm sorry. Okay. This is cool. And it has something to do with Ayin. In the Old Testament, you have the Torah, right, which is, a lot of us call it the law. It's probably better if we called it the instructions. Okay, it's not a law. It's instructions. Follow God's instructions and things should go well. Things will go well. And in Leviticus 25, verses 1 through 4, it says, the Yahweh then spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall have a Sabbath to Yahweh. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its crop. But during the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to Yahweh. You shall not sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. Your harvest's aftergrowth you shall not reap, and your grapes of untrimmed vines you shall not gather. The land shall have a sabbatical year. All of you shall have the Sabbath products of the land for food, yourself, and your male and female slaves, and your hired man, and your foreign resident, those who live as aliens with you. Even your cattle and the animals that are in your land shall have all its crops to eat. Okay, so the rule is 6 years you can plant and harvest, but on that 7th year you are not to plant anything. Let the field sit fallow, it's called in English, okay? And by the way, I'm still in Kyrgyzstan, as I said, and in Kyrgyzstan they do the same thing. Every so many years they let the land rest. The farmers just know this is something that you have to do in order for the land to, I don't know, rejuvenate, all right? So, that was the instruction. And there's consequences for breaking the instruction. Leviticus 26, starting in verse 27. Yet, if in spite of this you do not obey me, but act with hostility against me, then I will act with wrathful hostility against you, and I, even I, will punish you 7 times for your sins. Further, you will eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters you will eat. I then will destroy your high places, and cut down your incense altars, and heap your remains on the remains of your idols, for my soul shall abhor you. Verse 31, I will lay waste your cities as well, and will make your sanctuaries desolate. I will not smell your soothing aromas. I will make the land desolate, so that your enemies who settle in it will be appalled over it. You, however, I will scatter among the nations, and will draw out a sword after you, as your land becomes desolate, and your cities become waste. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbaths all the days of the desolation, while you are in your enemy's land. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. Verse 35. All the days of its desolation it will observe the rest, which it did not observe on your Sabbaths, while you were living on it. As for those of you who may be left, I will also bring weakness into their heart in the lands of their enemies, and the sound of a driven leaf will chase them. And even when no one is pursuing, they will flee as though from the sword, and they will fall. So he says, if you don't keep the Sabbaths, the sabbatical years, and let the land rest, I'm going to remove you from the land, and then the land will be empty, and it will earn or get the rests that it requires. Okay? And that's what happened. The Jews were not letting the land rest, and subsequently Nebuchadnezzar came and took the southern tribes to Babylon. Assyria came and invaded the north and took all the northern tribes away, to which they've never been found. And then they were gone. They were taken away for 70 years. Okay, 70 years. That sounds like that they missed 70 sabbatical years, right? There have been 70 years that the land did not get to rest. By the way, they do try to get around this, I've heard, that if you're Jewish and you own some land and you like producing on this land, and it's coming up to a sabbatical year, and you really don't want to let it rest. You know, you've got fertilizers. You can pump some fertilizer into it, and this is more modern rules, okay, that they're following. So what they will do is they will sell their land to a Gentile for $1 in the sabbatical year. And then they can say, well, it wasn't my land. I didn't, he didn't let it rest, but it wasn't mine. I didn't break any rules. You know, the Jews aren't the only ones who find loopholes. They're just the best at it because they've been doing it for so long. And so that's one way they kind of get around not letting the land rest. They supplement it with fertilizers and chemicals, okay? And the other thing that I want to mention on this point is, you know, we have the Torah, which is written in stone, carved on stone with God's finger, right? The Ten Commandments in the Ark of the Covenant. But the Jews have something called an oral Torah. There's a written Torah and an oral Torah. Now, I personally do not believe in the oral Torah. But the oral Torah, here's what supposedly happened. Moses went up on the mountain, and God gave him the written Torah, and then he sat and talked to Moses for 40 days. And what did he talk about? Well, he gave a whole bunch of other rules or interpretations of the rules that Moses was supposed to come down and share verbally, and then they would pass it on to their descendants and descendants and descendants, and on and on and on. And it's gone for 3,000 years, and it's like that game Whisper in high school or in middle school, right? You tell somebody a secret, and then they tell, and then they tell, and then they tell, and it goes the whole way around the room. And when it gets to the end, it is absolutely, completely different from how it started. People are not good at passing on things exactly, right? But the Jews claim that this is what's happened. And so now this is how you get all of these crazy interpretations of the law where, okay, it's the Sabbath, and on the Sabbath you may flake dandruff out of your hair, but you cannot scratch your head and to remove dandruff, because that would be considered work. Well, it just says don't work on the Sabbath. Where are you getting this that you can't scratch? Well, that's the oral Torah. You know, they pull this thing out. Whoosh, they pull this thing out whoosh, like it's a sword. You know, anytime there's something that they can't that you question them with, that's the oral Torah. So I've got problems with the oral Torah. In fact, the oral Torah has been written down. It's called the Talmud. Okay, it would not fill this. It would overflow this room. The Talmud. It's millennia of interpretations of rabbis saying, well, that's the oral Torah. Moses was told this by God and he passed it on. So, again, I don't believe oral Torah. I'm sticking with written Torah because I see the amazing wows that God has hidden in the written Torah. Okay? The oral Torah just seems to be their excuse for passing whatever laws at their whim. But you know, it does kind of make sense to realize that here, this is 1,000 years after the written Torah was given, and God is taking the Jews out of Israel for 70 years. And for what reason? Because they did not let the land rest during their Sabbath years. You know, it seems kind of obvious that how in the world can they remember they remember that oral rule that God said, don't flake, you can flake dandruff, but you can't scratch dandruff. That one passed on through until today. 3,000 years, they've been whispering and passing that one on. But for some reason, they missed 70 sabbatical years. And that was a written law. So I'm thinking, you know, if they weren't diligent enough to keep the written law, how diligent were they in passing on the oral law about flaking dandruff or scratching dandruff? You understand? So it kind of shoots holes in the whole oral Torah argument, in my opinion. Okay? But nevertheless, God did send them out of the land for 70 years because they were not keeping that rule, letting the land rest. Well, if they're gone for 70 years, and remember, the sabbatical year is every 7. So it sounds like, just being the math guy that I am, there was 490 years that they didn't keep sabbatical years. Because now the land is owed its rest. So if you take 490 and divide it by 7, you get 70 yeys. Okay? And we know that they were gone for 70 years. Let's just go and read where we know that they did break the rule. Look in Jeremiah 25, starting in verse 8. Therefore says Yahweh of hosts, because you have not obeyed my words, behold, I will send and take all the families of the north, declares the Lord, and I will send to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against his land and against its inhabitants and against all these nations round about, and I will utterly destroy them and make them a horrible and a hissing and an everlasting desolation. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of joy and the voice of gladness and the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the lamp. This whole land will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then it will be when 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, declares Yahweh, for their iniquity and the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it an everlasting desolation. I will bring upon the land all my words which I have pronounced against it, all that is written in his book, which Jeremiah has prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings will make slaves of them, even them, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and according to the works of their hands. Verse 20 of 2 Chronicles 36. It says, those who had escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and to his servants until the rule of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths, all the days of its desolation it kept Sabbath, until 70 years were complete. Okay, so it was prophesied that he would send them away so the land could rest. He did send them away because they broke the rule. And they were taken away for 70 years. So their captivity was 70 years for missing 70 Sabbath years. And we know the rule, reminding Leviticus 25:3, 6 years you will sow, 6 years you shall prune, but during the 7th year the land will have a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Okay, so it's 1 and 7, so it sounds like 490 years they missed. But there was no period of 490 years, if you study the history, where Israel was there not covering the land. In fact, he actually tells us how long of a period they didn't let the land rest, and they didn't follow the rules. It's hinted like a cement pie in your face, in Ezekiel 4, starting in verse 1. And God is telling Ezekiel, now you, son of man, get yourself a brick, place it before you, and inscribe a city on it, Jerusalem. Then lay siege against it, build a siege wall, raise up a ramp, pitch camps, and place battering rams against it all around. Then get yourself an iron plate, and set it up as an iron wall between you and the city, and set your face toward it, so that it is under siege, and besiege it. This is a sign to the house of Israel. Okay, so this is all symbolic that Ezekiel is supposed to be doing, but it's showing that Jerusalem is about to be punished and laid siege to. Okay, verse 4. As for you, talking to Ezekiel, lie down on your left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel on it. And you shall bear their iniquity for the number of days that you lie on it. For I have assigned you a number of days corresponding to the years of their iniquity, 390 days. Thus you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. When you have completed these, you shall lie down a second time, but on your right side, and bear the iniquity of the house of Judah. I have assigned it to you for 40 days, a day for each year. Okay, so 390 years, Israel didn't keep the Sabbaths. And for 40 years, Judah didn't keep the Sabbaths. That's a total of 430 years they didn't keep the Sabbaths, or probably many of the laws, instructions. Okay, 430, well that's not 490. Why is he punishing them 70 years if they only disobeyed 430? Well, let's just take a dividing here. 430 divided by 7 comes out to 61.42 years they should be punished. And that's less than 70 years. Why is he punishing them 70 years? Well, here's the answer. It lay in Leviticus 25, starting in verse 8. Remember, this is besides the every 7 years you let the land rest. Now, in verse 8 it says, you are also to count off 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years, namely 49 years. You shall then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month, Yom Kippur. On the day of atonement, you shall sound a horn all through your land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you shall return to his family. This is a jubilee year, a Yubel. Verse 11. You shall have the 50th year as a jubilee. You shall not sow, nor reap its aftergrowth, nor gather in from its untrimmed vines. For it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat its crops out of the field. On this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his own property. If you make a sale, moreover, to your friend, or buy from your friend's hand, you shall not wrong one another. Corresponding to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your friend. He is to sell you according to the number of years of crops. Verse 20. But if you say, what are we going to eat on the 7th year, if we do not sow or gather in our crops? Then I will so order my blessing for you in the 6th year, that it will bring forth the crop for 3 years. When you are sowing the 8th year, you can still eat old things from the crop, eating the old until the 9th year when its crop comes in. Okay, did you understand all that? If not, go back and listen to it again, or go read it yourself. But here's what it's saying. Remember, every 7th year is a sabbatical year. And then after 7 sabbatical years, the 49th year, it would also be, the 49th year is also a sabbatical year. Then the 50th year is a year of Jubilee. And a year of Jubilee is counted just like a sabbatical year. And you are not to plant during the sabbatical year. And he says he's going to give you enough food in the 48th year to cover the 49th year and to cover the 50th year. Right? So you can't sow in the 50th year, but you can reap stuff that comes in that has been grown just naturally. Okay? But he's going to give you enough in the year 48 to last you until the next time you can plant, which will be 3 years later. So, not only are you to let the land rest every 7 years, you also have to let it rest every 50th year. Okay, on the year of Jubilee. So, let's now look at the number of years. Remember how many years it was? 430 years they did not keep the Sabbaths. Okay, and a Jubilee year is a Sabbath. So, in the first 49-year period, year one, by the way, is also year 50 from the previous cycle. So year 1, it needs to rest. Year 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, and 49. There are 8 Sabbaths that they missed in that 49-year period. The second 49-year period, there's another 8. So in 98 years, they missed 16 Sabbaths. In 147 years, they missed 24. 32, 40, 48, 56, and they missed 64 Sabbaths in the 392-year period. Well, that's not 430 years. We're still 38 years short of the 430 years that they missed. So, in the 9th period, they missed year 1. They missed year 7, 14, 21, 28, and 35. There's another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more Sabbaths. There they've missed 70 Sabbaths in a 430-year period. So there's the correct math for this problem. It's not 490 years. Sometimes atheists like to point out, there wasn't 490 years. Yeah, well, first of all, you have to be a pretty smart atheist if you're studying this deeply to realize that this is a mistake. But that's the answer to it right there, okay? All right, God bless. We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.